Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq. Steelers Nation. One more again. We come to holler at you. Steelers game prep. Man, another beautiful day. This time, we out in the elements a little bit, man. Although it is a road game. So the Steelers are away in Washington, in the confines of D.C., right? In an away stadium, and we like the way that they perform there. Um, so this is sort of a combination video. In combination, I mean that I'm going to give just a couple of head nods to last week in the victory. Before, not last week, actually, we had the bye week, folks, and I was on a bit of a bye week. I welcome myself back, and I welcome you all back to Steelers game prep. But yeah, we had an interesting game versus the Washington Giants. Of course, we were victorious. Both defenses got after it a little bit in the pass rush. Steelers and the Giants both recording 4 sacks. The Giants had a late sort of offensive burst, particularly in their run game. And the Steelers ended up giving up I believe, 145 yards to that young man. I forget his name, but pardon me. So the Giants ended up doing well. Darius Slayton was their leader in receiving. And Daniel Jones' numbers actually ended up, outside in the element, folks. Bugs not attacking, but yeah, whatever. Excuse me. This is how we live live, man. Yeah, no doubt. But the Steelers with allowing some late offensive plays from the Giants gave up some statistics that they really could have and likely should have avoided. But anyway, that's all in hindsight, as that was a victory for the Steelers, where we see and we're very pleased to see Najee Harris notch another 100-yard game. And overall, the Steelers rushing the ball very well with, I believe, like close to 175 yards rushing, something like that, as a team. So that was very impressive. And George Pickens did his thing with some really nice long balls as well, and other contributions. And we seen the dope splash play in the special teams game with the punt return by Calvin Austin III. So really a nice performance by the Steelers in that victory against the New York Giants. A lot of people balk at the Steelers' ability to produce over 400 yards in offense that game, and say, well, yeah, they moved the ball against the Giants defense, and they point to both of the defenses that they have faced in the past couple of games. Well, today, folks, that brings us to a whole new story because the Washington Commanders at 7-2 have a very solid, a very good defense. And they themselves have been very explosive and dynamic on offense. And all together at 7-2 boast a strong record and pose a very stiff challenge for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that brings us up to today's game. And I'm gonna try to be as concise as possible. But I did want to get some very specific statistics involved in my notes, right? Because for Steelers fans, I think this game is also particularly important because this will be very indicative of the kind of offensive potential that they'll be facing next week against the Ravens, right? The Ravens have a very dynamic offense as well, and there are a lot of similarities, right, in what you would face between the two teams. So let's dive in real quick to some statistics here, what I was able to uncover in terms of the offensive and defensive statistics. With the defense, I pretty much kept it to production, right? But with the offense, I got a little bit more into tendencies, right? And I got these statistics and tendencies online from places like Modelo, Fox Sports.com, NFL.com, ESPN.com, etc. Right? Numerous places. So you guys can find this stuff online too. Now, just to go into some of the offensive numbers, right, in terms of what we have seen out of this dynamic offense that the Washington Commanders have exhibited so far. First of all, let's look at their pass rate, rush rate, right, which is just a percentage of the time that they either pass the ball or run the ball. They pass the ball 56% of the time and rush the ball 43% of the time, right? So pretty decent balance, right? Middle of the pack ish on balance, maybe a slight lean toward the pass, but that's fine. Actually, they're probably more honest in terms of balance than a lot of NFL teams, because a lot of NFL teams these days sort of lean heavily toward the passing game. Well, the rules are a bit skewed that way. Personal opinion, personal opinion, personal opinion. But in my personal opinion, the rules are a bit skewed towards success in the passing game, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. But anyway, their average target depth is 8.1 yards, which is a little bit around middle of the package, maybe slightly above. In terms of how they distribute the ball to their eligibles, Tomlinism, to their eligibles, they get the ball targeted to the left 32% of the time, the left hash of the field. The right hash of the field 44% of the time, and the middle of the field 22% of the time, which that's pretty good balance with a little bit of a lean toward the right. And I'm going to guess that's where McLaurin lines up at the most frequently. I'm just going to guess that those two things would correlate. All right. Let's look at their distribution in terms of how they spread the ball around, right? The wide receivers get the ball roughly around 61% of the time. Their tight ends right around 22% of the time. And the running backs right around 15% of the time, right? If we look at their running game, so you see, first of all, that they have, pretty good distribution with a heavy lean toward the wide receivers, but they have a very talented group there. So understandable. But they do hit up their tight ends. And every now and then they'll check it down to the running backs. All right. But in their running game, they are multifaceted as well, right? So They run the ball to the left hashes 40% of the time and to the right 59% of the time. So you see a lean, pretty heavy lean toward the right. I'm going to guess that that is the strength of their offensive line, right? In terms of the gaps that they hit, 50% of the time they're hitting the gap between the guards. 29% of the time they're hitting the gap between the tackles, and 40% of the time they're swinging it outside the edges around the ends, right? So that's a pretty heavy lean toward getting it out to the edges. They're definitely on the upper half of the league in terms of their lean toward wanting to stretch you out to the edges. That's a heavy part of their running game. Note, note, right? Message, right? All right. And on fourth downs, folks, they're 11 out of 11. So they're danger with going forward on fourth down, a real danger in that regard, right? 11 out of 11 on fourth downs. All right. So let's flip it over to the Steelers. What have we seen in their tendencies? Which, and I think this is very appropriate, right? Because like at this part of the season, teams have really started to have established their identities. Okay. So with the Steelers, they pass the ball roughly 51% of the time, which is middle of the package. All right. But maybe a little bit of an increase since Russ has come into the game. They run the ball 48% of the time, which is a little on the upper half of the league, right, in terms of running the ball frequency. In the passing game, their average depth of target is 8 yards, which was middle of the package, but for the Steelers represents an increase or an uptick sort of since Russ is coming to the game for sure. In terms of the way they distribute the ball directionally, right? They throw it to the left of the hashes roughly around 43% of the time, and to the middle 15% of the time, right? And to the right 40% of the time. So other teams would say, well, I guess that's likely where George Pickens lines up the most frequently, right? Because you definitely see a lean there. All right, but in terms of their distribution in general, how they distribute the ball to their eligibles, the Pittsburgh Steelers, 52% of the time they're going to the wideouts, the wide receivers. The tight ends are getting the ball 25% of the time, which is a little bit more frequently than Washington, and actually a little bit, just barely on the upper part of the league, a little bit more than middle of the pack. And the running backs 21% of the time, which is a little bit higher as well. It's a little bit higher. Okay, then they're running the ball. If we get into the Steelers' running game, they run to the left of the hashes around 51% of the time, and to the right of the hashes 48% of the time. So they're a little bit more balanced in that regard than the Commanders. And then as far as how they hit their running gaps, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers hit it between the guards 37% of the time, between the tackles 35% of the time, and around the ends, stretching you out to the edges 26% of the time. So you see with the Steelers, definitely not the same focus to stretch the ball out to the edges, and more so between the guards and tackles, they attack you pretty evenly. And as far as the Steelers on fourth down, they've gone for it a few times, folks, and their success rate in comparison to the Washington Commanders, not so much. Right? So there's that. That's the offensive tendencies for both teams. All right, let's get into what we've seen in terms of the defenses for each team. Now, again, with me looking at the defenses, I went statistically what was the production, right? Rather than, like personnel tendencies and things of that nature. Because, for one, I feel like the Steelers in particular are a lot more fluid, and defenses in general are a lot more fluid in how they deploy their personnel. So tendencies can be a little more misleading with defenses, I feel like. Right? With offenses, it's more about identity, right? So it's more relevant. In my opinion. The defenses is a lot more about week to week matchup. I feel like. So I stuck with what we've seen production statistically from each of the teams. And if we go with the Washington Commanders, they are allowing 21 points per game. 3 touchdowns, folks. They're spotting the other team for 3 touchdowns, but they've been fairly prolific scorers of the ball. So, they thus are toting a 7-2 record. That's how that adds up. But the defense has given up 21 points per game on average. They have 24 sacks on the year already, however, which is getting them to, over 48 sacks on the year. That's a pretty good beat. So they are sacking the quarterback very well. Interceptions, not so much. They got 3 picks. Their total passing yards allowed is 1,650, middle of the pack-ish. Middle of the package toward, no, they maybe even creep up into the upper half of the league with that. That's actually pretty good. Their total rushing yards allowed has already been 1,287 yards. That's not that good. Not that good, right? Certainly on the lower half of the league with that. So the total yards, we came in at 2937. A little bit much, but still middle of the pack-ish, right? But they have given up 23 touchdowns, which is a little on the lower half of the league, I would say. All right, let's flip that over to the Steelers and their points per game, right? Still very, very impressive at 14.9, upper half of the league for sure, right? Much better than the Commanders at 21 points per game, right? So that's impressive on the part of the Steelers, but not as impressive, you'd be surprised to know, in the sack category with only 19. Those numbers, I kind of second guess both team numbers, but I don't know. I'll personally probably go back and look at those stats again. But only 19 sacks. A lot more impressive in the interception category, I believe tied for first in the league with 10 interceptions, if not in second. In terms of team interceptions, 10 interceptions. Total passing yards allowed, not so good, not so much. Lower half of the league is 1758, not the bottom of the league at all, middle of the pack-ish, but falling a little bit on, like on the lower half. They definitely need improvement there. Um, but in terms of rushing defense, pretty impressive at 724 yards. In comparison to the Commanders, 1,287 yards. The Steelers only 724 yards. So much more impressive in run defense for the Steelers. A total of only 2482, middle of the pack-ish, maybe creeping into the upper half of the league in terms of total yards allowed. But definitely need big improvement in what they're allowing in the passing game. But they have only allowed 12 touchdowns, which is almost half what the Commanders have allowed. So there's another area in which the Steelers defense has been very impressive. All right, folks. That's the sort of analytical, statistical look at it. Man, just off the rip, this is a big test for the Steelers, right? They have had wins against some teams that can easily be said are not as challenging. And conversely, this cannot be denied as a team that is challenging with a 7-2 record, first place in their division. So far looking like one of the best teams in the NFC. Very dynamic offense, a real challenge for the defense, and overall a good, and again, a really good defense as well. So overall, a very, very serious challenge and test for the Pittsburgh Steelers at this midway junction of the season, coming off of the bye week. Now, one of the significant things about them coming off of the bye week, certainly very rested, right? Which is significant because we got some folks coming back, which is key. The offensive line has certainly got much healthier, and we should be looking at close to, 100% starting lineup, so to speak, on the offensive line. That's a big thing. All the position groups look pretty much healthy. So the offense is, ready to go. And they've got the addition of Mike Williams coming via trade from the Jets. So that is really pretty big. Now having another big-time 50-50 guy going deep and presenting a headache for opposing defenses that they have to pay attention to opposite George Pickens. So that's actually pretty big. Along with the fact that I felt like the rest of the receiving corps was starting to really open up and come along. And, folks, we still have not really seen anything from the rookie Michigan receiver, who has a lot of promise as well. So, man, this is really looking like an impressive offensive lineup, as we've seen the tight end room be productive and start to include, Darnell and some of the other tight ends as well. I mean, this is an offense that does very much feature the tight end in both blocking and receiving. So, man, Freiermuth has been very impressive so far this year. Really looking good on the offensive side of the ball. We've seen great production. We saw better than what we expected out of Justin Fields when he played, and hats off to him, and big shout out and props to him. So that puts us in great position. right? As we see Russell doing his thing and Russell starting to cook, right? So, man, our quarterback room looks great. Everything is really looking up on the offensive side of the ball. Now, defensively as well, with the addition of Preston Smith, I think that's the brother's name, Preston Smith, coming over from the Packers. Big body outside linebacker, right? Pretty much could even look at him as almost an extra end on the run fits. That'll help, but very much a pass rush threat, right? And somebody again who you can rotate with TJ and Highsmith. So we're absolutely loaded now at that position. And overall, I'd have to say on the defense period, looking healthy now, should have most bodies on the line. Same thing in the linebacking room. Still don't have a couple of players there yet, but we do have, our good rotation with our impressive rookie Wilson and, really starting to see comfort come with Patrick Queen in the defense and see his production pick up and see him moving more instinctively as he's getting comfortable with being where he needs to be at the time he needs to be there in relationship to everybody else in the defense. So seeing him only pick up more and more and excited to see where his game is going to go the rest of the season. My man, excuse the mental lapse, but the other brother who at the Landon Roberts, excuse me. Excuse me, E-Rob. My bad, brother. Because he's balling as expected, and the thumper that we need to see both in the running game and sometimes shooting in there on some impressive blitzes. So the linebacking core looks magnificent. You would go back into the secondary, and our additions in the offseason have been shining in Elliott and Dante on the at the corner position, and man, they both been home run hitters so far as I'm concerned. So that's magnificent with Joey still balling out on the other side, Joey Porter Jr. and the rest of the safeties looking excellent as well, and Minka. Now getting I think comfortable again and feeling like he can go back and roam and not have to cover, because one of the things that Minka Fitzpatrick I don't think gets enough credit for is that he's a fire putter outer, right? A lot of times last year he was in a position where he had to make sure he's plugging the leaks, right, in certain other areas. And now I feel like he likely doesn't have to do that, and he's probably feeling more and more comfortable not having to do that. So I expect big things out of him in the second half of the year. And the rest of the safety group as well, man. Everybody's looking really productive, and I just don't see any holes in his defense. If anything, we've gotten better. Oh, and I'd be remiss. Beanie Bishop has proven that he is valuable in slot coverage. And now on top of that, you understand, we get Cam Sutton back. We get our utility blade, right? Our Swiss Army knife, so to speak, figuratively. I mean no negative references. But we get our utility man back who can do it all. And I don't even care what he did or didn't do anywhere else. We know in the Steelers uniform, he can do it all, man. Right? So I'm super excited to see nothing but a boost to the secondary with him back there. So, man, not just I don't see no holes, there just aren't any holes in this defense. And with everybody being healthy, I think we're going to see the production out of this defense go through the roof in the second half of the season. And they're going to really be something for other teams to contend with. So, man, excited about this really, really big game this week against the Washington Commanders. And again, a test, man, if the Steelers win this game, then there is no more, oh, they're not, they're paper champions. They're not really a contender or a threat to any of the big time teams in the AFC. They haven't played anybody out of that. Nah, if we win this game, we did play somebody, and we did beat a significant test of a team and a powerful, legitimate contender in the Washington Commanders. So, really excited to see the Steelers meet this challenge and move forward in what we want to see be a deep playoff push and a championship run. Man, this is Steelers Game Prep. Thank you all. One more again, Big King Sadiq. Steelers Nation, roll with me. I'm out.